just click the button that says got it. So it clears off the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm going to share the Gemara, which I believe is here. Okay, can you see the Gemara? Oh, not yet. Can you see the Gemara now?
I don't see anything. I see the YouTube screen.
Okay, it takes a little,
Yeah, we're good.
a little bit of delay. Okay, so we left off yesterday where we were looking for a makar for Beishamai, who says that for Kiddushin, you have to give a dinner or Shabbat dinner. So the last makar that was offered was by Rish Lakish. And what he said is as follows. We know that by Amar Abriya, it says that if she wants to bail herself out early, she is v'hafta, she bails herself out, mi kesef miknasai, from the kesef that was used to buy her. So it uses the word mi kesef miknasai when it discusses the purchase of an Amavriya, she's purchased with kesef. We also know that an Amavriya pays down, prorated, to get herself released from her servitude. So, Dr. Gemara, if the Kesef Miknasri was a dinner, I understand how she can pay back part of the dinner, prorated, to redeem herself based on how many years she has already worked. But if she was only purchased in the first place for a mere pruta, you cannot pay back a partial pruta, because pruta is the lowest possible denomination that you could pay with. So since we know by Amar Avriya, there's a purchase and then there's a reduced payment to buy yourself back, that proves that the purchase price could not have been a pruta. Therefore, we're going to assume it was a dinner. That's the Gemara's riot. The Gemara asked, who said that in every case you have to be able to pay back prorated? Maybe all the Torah means to say is, if you bought her for a dinner where there's plenty of money there where you could pay back partially, that's when the Torah says the way she buys herself back is by paying prorated. However, if you only bought her for a fruit in the first place, then if she redeems herself, she'll have to pay back the full fruit. That's not logical, because we know there's a rule by Amavriya that the Adon has a right, has an option to be miyayed her, to marry her, either himself or his son, but it's not mandatory. However, you're not allowed to buy an Amma unless it's possible for you to marry her. So you wouldn't be able to buy an Amma that's also for you to marry. You would not be able to buy your wife's sister as an Amma because it's also to marry her. So even though you don't have to make yield, you cannot buy an Amma whom you cannot be miyayed. Based on that logic, it's up to Gemara. If the Torah says that the way of yourself is by paying back part of the original purchase payment prorated, well then you wouldn't be able to buy an Amavri at all unless it was in such a way where you could do that. So therefore, it has to be that you purchased her for a dinner and not a mere pruta, which takes us to the top of the Amid, which is the Yud, Ma Yud, Afagav, Viboy Miyai, Viboy Miyai. Even though by Yud it's optional, yet you have to buy an Amma who it's possible for you to have the option to be Miyai. It wouldn't be a purchase. If you would not be able to make a partial payment prorated to buy yourself back, it would not be a valid purchase of the Amavriya. So now we know this by Amavriya. We still have to carry this back to Kiddushin because our ultimate goal is to prove that for dinner. Dr. Gemara following through on the fourth line of Daf Yud Beis The Kiddushin Isha L'Beishamai, not L'hu Me'olam Ivri. According to Beishamai, we learned the amount of money required for Kiddushin from an Amavri. Ma'amavri, the just like the Pruta Loy Mekanya, you would not be able to buy an Amavriya for Pruta. And the reason why you couldn't buy an Amavriya for a Pruta is because then you wouldn't be able to make the Giroid peasant when she buys herself back. Each of a Pruta, so to a woman, you cannot buy her for a Pruta. Correct the Gemara, the whole driver behind what's happening here is that you need to be able to pay back part of the purchase price. That doesn't mean you have to go up to a dinner. The aim of correct the Gemara, the aim of Palgo the dinner, the aim of Shtei. Who said that the purchase of a Dong of Ria has to be a dinner? It could be a lot less than a dinner, and there's still room to pay back a partial price. So to Gemara, Kiva the Picta, Mepruta, once we know that you cannot buy a Nava or a Pruta, Ulkma a dinner, then means that the term means to tell us that it demands more significant type of payment, and the more significant type of payment is a dinner. Rav Amar, Hani Tami de Beishamai, Rava has another shot to explain why Beishamai says that it needs to be a dinner. And Rava's shot is somewhat similar to Reb Seir's shot earlier, and that Hani Tami de Beishamai Shalohu Benois Yisrael Kehefker. Reb Seir said on the base that the reason for it is because a woman would not agree to marry herself off for a pruta. A woman would not agree to marry herself off for less than a dinner. And the Gemara challenged Reb Seir. The Gemara said, what if she did? And in fact, Reb Seir said if she did, it would be acceptable. But what if she appointed a shliach, and the shliach, and she didn't tell the shliach how much money to accept? I'm told that you cannot hear me well. Avigdor just sent a message and you cannot hear me.
You hear me, Yosy? You hear me?
Yeah, I do. I hear you perfectly.
It's like a bad cell phone call. Not terrible, but I hear you pretty okay.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my microphone, and if that doesn't work, then I'm going to shut off my video completely.
Okay, fine.
1 second. Can you hear me now?
I hear you fine.
Is it better or is it worse?
Better.
Okay,
So far.
I changed the microphone from my headphones to
Now
the computer itself. So
you're fading out again.
okay, so let me shut that video off. It probably just don't have enough bandwidth.
Okay.
So I'm going to shut the video off. Yeah, I'm hoping that this might help. Did this get any better?
So again, right now, yeah. Start talking, you'll see. That's it.
Okay. Okay. So Gemara, Rava says, similar to Reb Zera, that it's because a woman who doesn't want to accept less than a dinner because a lady doesn't want to sell herself for so cheap. But unlike Reb Zera, who says that if a woman decided that she's willing to accept even a pruta, it would be a good Kiddushin, Rava says no. Since we don't want B'nai Yisrael to be kehefker, even if the woman accepts less than a dinner, even if the woman accepts a pruta for Kiddushin, the Rabbanan are mafkia the Kiddushin from her, because the Rabbanan do not want women being married for so little. They feel it makes the B'nai Yisrael hefker, and it's the Rabbanan who mandate the minimum shear of a dinner. Okay. Is it any better, Strudel?
It's not really much better. Not really much better. I hear you okay. It is what it is. I hear you pretty okay.
Okay.
Every once in a while,
Let's see the one. Okay, still I'm Bepruta. So we've tackled the sugya of the Torah of Bishama, that it's a dinner, and now we're looking at Pruta. So Savar Rabbi Yosef Lameima. Rabbi Yosef wanted to say, Pruta koldu. What does Pruta mean? Any amount that at that time would be the smallest payment. In other words, wherever you are at any time, whatever the smallest available payment is,
that would be accepted, the smallest coin. So for Rabbi Yosef Lamim Pruta Omerle Abaye said that cannot be, because we have Mishnayos that dictate the exact value of what the pruta needs to be. V'halakatani kamahi pruta. Our Mishnah told us right away. What is a pruta? Echad mishmayna be'isur haitalki. It has to be 1/8 of the value of an isur haitalki. If it could be any minimum payment, why is the Mishnah telling me what its value has to be? The Mishnah should just have said, and the smallest coin that you could find. It must be that there is some minimum value that the pruta has to have. Maybe the reason why the Mishnah said was just to tell us what that smallest coin happened to have been in the times of Moshe. But of course, that will always adjust in the time and place based on the lowest, smallest coin you could find. That can't be because Omar Shir Absimoi B'Doiroi Kam Hipruta Echad Mishmoina B'Isri Talki. There was actually a shaila where they used a small coin, and it came to Rabdimi, and Rabdimi had to make the assessment: is this a good Kiddushin? And he wanted to make sure that it had a value of 1/8 of an Isri Talki. So you see, there's this minimum requirement, and it's not just any small coin. Shiru kamu have a pruta echad mishisha be'isur ital, 1/6 of an isur haitalki. So we have over here a machloikis even about what is the value of a pruta. Is it only 1/8 of an isur, or is it a larger pruta that's 1/6 of an isur? So it's not just the smallest coin that you could find. If you're going to tell me that there has to be a minimum, and in fact, you don't just say the smallest possible coin, then we're going to have a problem. Say the chashoiv, kama prutois b'shnei sloim. The Brisa says, when it comes to Me'ilah, the halach is if you're moil, even a shava pruta of hektish, you have to pay a carbon of shnei sloim. So what the Brisa is telling us, be very careful with Me'ilah, because you could have a no of such a tiny amount, and you're going to have to pay as a kapara thousands of times the value of what you were moil, of the no that you had. How many prutas are there in Shnei Sloim, which is how much you have to buy your carbon for? Yoser me'alpayim, more than 2,000. Now, Zokt Reb Zera, Zokt Reb Yosef. Reb Yosef told the Bible, if you use your chesh of 1/8 or 1/6 of an Isri Talki, you're not going to find over 2,000 prutas in 2 sela. If a pruta could be any tiny amount, it's possible to have such a tiny amount that there'll be more than 2,000 prutas in the 2 sloim. But if you make the cheshbon of echad mishmoina be'isri talki, there's not even close to 2,000 prutas in a sela, and we're going to make that cheshbon shortly. Hashta alpayim loyhavim, that you don't even have 2,000 prutas in 2 sloim. Yeser me'alpayim karilu, and the Raisa refers to it as more than 2,000. We don't even have 2,000. It's less than 2,000. Ahusaba. So Ahusaba came along and said, you have to change the nusach of the Brisa. And what it means to say is anotanina karev l'alpayim. All it means is not that there's more than 2,000 prutos in the 2 sloim. It means there's almost 2,000 prutos. Zok Gemara, let's figure it out. Soif alpha b'chamish meos utalsin b'shita udahavim. You know how many prutos there actually are in 2 sloim? 1,536. That's not even near. That's not even near 2,000. Zaktumar, Kivan the Nafkalahu, Mipalga, once it's already more than 1,500, so we round it. Korev la Paim Korev. The Brisa can refer to anything over 1,500 prutos as Korev near the 2,000. Where is the cheshbon of the 1,536 prutos? So Rashi makes a very simple cheshbon. It's not complicated at all. So I'm going to read Rashi Alpha v'chamesh meya u'talsa v'shita. Asela dalad. Asela is 4 dinar. V'adinar chaf dalad isra, and the dinner is 24 isra. 4 times 24 is 96. Okay. The Isser Shmoina Prutois, if an Isser Shmoina Prutois, so you have 96 times 8. 96 times 8 is the Isser Shmoina Prutois, Nimtu Kuf Tzadik Beis Prutois per dinner. You'll have 192 Prutois in a dinner. How do you have 192 Prutois in a dinner? Because a dinner is 24 Isrin, and 24 times 8 is 192. 24 times 8 is 192. And in how many dinarim are there in 2 sloim? 8. The Shemani dinar should be shnei shlo. So 192 times 8 is Oilam kolechad Masai Prutos Chaser Shmona Ari Elef V'Taf Kuf Lamadva. If you take 192 times 8, 192 times 8 is 1,536. So that's where the cheshbon comes from. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Okay, let's see where we're up to. So that's where we got Karev La'apayim. Gufa. Now we're going to drill down and understand this machlokes of whether a pruta is 1/8 of an Israel Talki or 1/6 of an Israel Talki. Now, there's 2 ways for a pruta to change its value relative to the Isser. It could be the pruta going up and down, which is the Gemara's default understanding, but it could also be the Isser going up and down. So you could either say if the pruta goes up in value, there'll only be 6 prutas to an Isser. If the pruta drops in value, there will be 8 prutas to an Isser. But on the other hand, you could say that the pruta could have stayed the same value. But if the Isser drops in value, then there'll only be 6 prutas in the Isser. If the Isser goes up in value, then there will be 8 prutas to the Isser. What is the nafkamina? The nafkamina is Lagabi a dinner, Lagabi the other coins. What has changed? If the Isser is going up and down, then the relationship between the pruta and the dinner will remain the same. But if the pruta is fluctuating in value, then the relationship between the pruta and the dinner will change. And that's really the 2 perspectives that we're looking at over here. So Zok the Gemara. Zok the Gemara as follows. Gufa. Kiyasar Abdini Amar Shir Absimoi B'Dairai Kamahi Pruta Echad Mishmoyne Be'Israel. So that's what Abdini said. A pruta is 1/8 of an Isra. The Chiyasar Rabin Amar Shir of the story of Rabbi Yoshia Kami Pruta Echad Mishisha Be'Israel. So at first glance, the machlokes is, and I think that's how it remains, the machlokes is, what is the value of the pruta? Is a pruta an expensive pruta that is only 1/6 of an Isser, or is a pruta a less expensive pruta, a pruta that's only 1/8 of an Isser? Let's say your machlokes is telling the machlokes tonight. In other words, you're arguing about the pruta's value. There's another machlokes that we found as well that's about the pruta's value. The Tanya we learned. Pruta she'amru chachamim echad mishmoina b'isar tal, and the Brisa proceeds to list off the relationship between different coins. I'm going to read it quickly, and then I'm going to share a chart with you that I made that outlines it a little bit better. Hopefully, will clarify it a little bit. So, Sheshma Kesef dinner. How many mo's are there in a dinner? 6 mo. A mo is shnei pajoinin, and the punjin is shnei isrin, which would mean, by the way, that there will be 24 isrin in a dinner. Because if a dinner is sheish mo, and a mo is shnei pajoinin, that means a dinner is 12 punjoinin, and if a punjin is 2 isrin, that means every dinner is 24 isrin. That's a key number to remember. The key number to remember is that an isser is 1/24th of a dinner, or 24 isrin makes up a dinner. Okay, let's go on. Isser is shnei musmisin, a musmis is shnei kuntrunknin, a kuntrunk is shnei prutas. Now, based on that cheshbon, let's have a look. How many prutos are in an isser? If an isser is 2 musmusin, and a musmus is shnei kutrunkin, so that means an isser is 4 kutrunkin, or 8 prutos. So nimsa pruta achas mishmoina be'isser harital. So based on the cheshbon of the Rabbanon, it's 1/8 of an isser. But keep in mind, an isser is 1/24th of a dinner. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel shloisha hadrasin lemo. So now he's mixing in some other types of coins. There's 3 hadrasin in a mo. There's shnei hansin lahadris. There's 2 hansin in hadris, and there's shnei shmonin in a hanitz, and there's beis prutois to a shaman. If you make the cheshbon, nimtza pruta achas mishisha be'isser harital. If you make the cheshbon, that will say that a pruta is 1/6 of an isser. And I'm going to get to there in just a minute with the chart. It'll make it a little easier to see. So Zoktamar Lema, the Mar Omer Katanakama, for Rav and Omer Krepshin Gamliel. It seems pretty clear. Our Tanakama here says Echad B'Shmoina, which is similar to Rav Dimi, and Shimon Gamliel says Echad Mishisha, which is similar to Rav. So it seems to be that your machloikis is a machloikis to it. Okay, so now I'm going to share with you a chart that will hopefully illustrate that. Hopefully it'll make it easier to understand rather than more difficult. I put this chart out on the WhatsApp group as well. So let me show you this chart. Hopefully everyone can see the chart. Can everyone see this chart? The Rabbanon 1, Rav Dimi? Yeah. So what we have here is as follows. Just look at the first line. And it says, a dinner is 1 dinner, it's 6 ma, it's 12 punjin, it's 24 isser. I highlighted that when I was reading the Gemara. 48 plus is 9,600, and it's 192 prutas. So if I want to look at the relationship between a pruta and a dinner, there's 192 prutos in the dinner. Based on this ratio, let's see how many prutos there are in an isser. So if I go across here, it shows me in the green that there's 8 prutos in an isser. This was how we understood Rav Dimi. However, if we look, and that's the Rabbanon that we read as well. But if you look at Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, who the Gemara wanted to propose was the same sheet as Ravin, here what's going to happen is an isser is still 1/24th of a dinner, but because there's only 6 prutos in an isser, and the isser is of higher value, there are only going to be 144 prutos in a dinner now. So here you clearly see a machloikis if the value of a pruta is 1/8 of an isser, and then you'll need 192 prutos to make up a dinner, or is a pruta more valuable? Is it only 1/6 of a dinner, and therefore only 144 prutas will make up dinner? The Gemara is going to answer, and before we see the Gemara inside, I'll show you the third chart, which is another way to show how there's only 6 prutos in an isser, yet there's still 192 prutos in a dinner, which means it's not the pruta that went up in value, it's rather the isser that went down in value. So if we scroll down to the third chart, what changed is it's still 1 dinner to 192 prutos. But what changed in value is now instead of having 24 isurim in a dinner, there's 32 isurim in a dinner because the isser dropped its value by 25%. So therefore, it's possible that even if you hold that the pruta is 1/6 of an isser, it still has not changed its value. You still need 192 prutos to make up a dinner. It only changed in relation to an isser because the isser dropped in value. And that's why there's only 6 prutos to make up an isser, but in fact you need 32 isurim to make up a dinner rather than the 24 in the other case. So that's all I wanted to illustrate with this chart. And now let's go back to the Gemara. Okay, so going back to the Gemara, that pruta dropped in value. So first of all, let me tomorrow. Okay, I'm related. No, we all hold that the pruta did not change value, and the pruta is still 192 prutas to a dinner. The reason why you see a difference in the brisa of Shimon Gamliel is had the ikar isri, had the zol isri. Had the ikar isri, when the isr is valuable, kum esrim va'arba bezuz, then there'll only be 24 isrim in zuz, and that's why there'll be 8 prutas in an isr. Had the zol, but if the isr drops in value, kum tart plus and utart bezuz, you'll need 32 isrim to make up a zuz. And when that happens, then there's only 6 prutas in the Isser because the Isser dropped in value, but there's no raya that the Abana and the Tanakam and the Shimon Gamliel argue about the value of the pruta. They're talking about the value of the Isser, but Ravin and myself argue about the value of the pruta. Okay, that's the end of this sugya. Now we're about to approach a new bombshell sugya. Zogt Gemara Omar Shmuel said as follows. A man was makadosh a woman with a date. Now, a date is not worth that much. Afilu oimed for tomorrow dinner, even if you could buy a vast amount of tomorrow with a dinner, which would mean that right now where you are, this date is not nearly worth even a pruta. Still mikudeshes. It was still mikudeshes. Why is that? Chashinon shema shava pruta b'mada. Over here, dates are not valuable, but there might be somewhere in the world where a date is very valuable. And this here in and of itself is a very, very big chiddush, because we had another sugya earlier in this Masechta about Rav Kahana who would accept a sudar instead of the 5 shloim that he's entitled to get by pidyon. And even though the sudar wasn't worth 5 shloim, Rav Kahana said, "L'didi shavali," to me it's worth more. I'm willing to pay more for it, and therefore, to me it's worth the 5 shloim, and therefore we credit him for the 5 shloim. A portion of the question. The question they asked is, if you have the concept of L'didi shavali, if she's accepting it, why do I need the shita? Why do I need the svara of Sheva Pruta B'Madai? She has to accept it. If she's accepting it, then she has a L'didi Shavali. Why do I need this whole svara of Sheva Pruta B'Madai? So the Stipler goes into a very nice explanation. And he says, when someone is Mekadesh a woman with a Tamara, which is worth less than a Sheva Pruta, we actually have 2 problems here. Problem number 1 is the woman wouldn't be nicha to accept. But there's another problem here, that this doesn't have the status of kesef. It's not even worth a pruta. It doesn't have the status of kesef. So even if she would accept it, it wouldn't give it a status of kesef. When Rav Kahana accepted the sudar and he accepted it as 5 shloim, it wasn't a question of whether or not it had the status of kesef. It was worth near 5 shloim, but because it was for sure worth more than a pruta, but it might not have been worth the 5 shloim. For that, l'didi shavali works. Here, the question is, even if this is status of kesef. So in order for it to have a status of kesef, you can't say l'didi shavali. If it's not kesef, you can't make it a kesef. But if you have a shemeshav pruta b'madai, if it's worth a pruta somewhere else, that will at least give it a status of kesef. Once it has a status of kesef, now we have a second problem. She won't accept it. She's supposed to get a minimum of a pruta. For that, you have a l'didi shav. So based on that, let's continue on in the Gemara. Frek the Gemara, it's Chashinon, Shema Shava Pruta B'Madai. But it's not Shema. Frek the Gemara, Banantnan, Besil Amim, Bepruta B'Shava Pruta. It's not a Suffolk Pruta, it has to be a Vadai Pruta. So how can you tell me because of Shema, it's going to be a good Kiddushin? So to Melakasha, Habi Kiddushi Vadai, Habi Kiddushi Suffolk. All Shmuel Paskin was that if a woman accepted a date for her Kiddushin, she might be Mekudesh. Which means if someone else came along and married her and gave her Kiddushin, it would be a Suffolk. Is she Mekudesh to the first, or is she Mekudesh to the second? And therefore she would need a get from both of them. Ahu Gavra, there was a fellow, to Aktish V'Zavda Du'urdi. He was Mekadesh, a woman with Zavda Du'urdi, which Rashi tells us is a little bundle of milk of flax. And again, it wasn't worth so much. Yosy Rapsimi Barachia Kamei Rav. The Kamayim. Rapsimi Barabi wanted to know, is she Mikudeshes or not? Does she need a get from the second husband? Does she need a get from the first husband? And he was trying to see is Shava in Eloi. He said, if it'll have a Shava she'll be Mikudeshes. And if it doesn't, it's not worth a Shava it's not Mikudeshes. Frank the Gemara, but if you hold like Shmuel, be less b'shava pruta loy, but Amar Shmuel chashina. Doesn't Shmuel say that even if you assess it that it's not worth the shava pruta, she still needs a get because you have to be choishes shema shava pruta b'matai. That's going to loy kasha. Habi kedusha vadai, habi kedusha sof. You're right. If it's a question of kedusha vadai, that's what he was. That's what Rav Dini was saying. But he will agree that it's a sofa kedushin, even if here he assesses it that it wasn't worth a Shava Pruta, it's still a Sofa Kiddushin, and we would still require it. Who Gavra to Aktish Ba'avna Dukul. He used for Kiddushin stones, it's black marble. He used a stone that was made out of black marble to marry his wife. Yosef Reb Chista, the Chamishayerle, used Shava Pruta in the Loiloi. Now Reb Chista was trying to assess whether or not it was worth it. Now, in this case, it was a little bit more complicated because the second husband was the brother of this first man who gave Avnu the Pukul. So what's going to happen here is, if in fact she's Suffolk Mukadeshes, then she's also to both of these husbands because she might be Garusha Suffolk. You're not allowed to marry a woman who was once married to your brother, even if you divorced her. So now this is a much more serious case because this woman might not be mutter to anybody else. So Reb Chista was trying to find a way to be mad to her. So Zog to Gemara, what happened? Reb Chista was trying to see East Bishava Pruta in the loy. Frankly, Gemara, the same question, the less Bishava Pruta loy, Yom Shmuel Chashina. So tomorrow, Reb Chista was several like Shmuel. Reb Chista must disagree with Shmuel. And he holds that you look here and now. If here and now it's worth a Pruta, it would be a Kiddushin. If here and now it's not worth a Pruta, it wouldn't be a Kiddushin. And therefore, he can be mad to her, to the brother. Zog to Gemara, Amrla Imei, the mother of this woman who is the subject of this question of whether or not the Kiddushin that she accepted was a good Kiddushin, the Kidsha, Hava Beshava Pruta. She told him, Chista, I don't want her to be married to the second husband because I know she's married to her first husband. How do I know she's married to the first guy? Because even if you make an assessment today in your court that this is not worth the Shava Pruta today, I'm telling you, back then, when the story actually occurred, then that day, this was worth a Pruta. And therefore, she's also to her second husband, because her second husband married an Eshishish. Omer Law, Rav Chista told her, I don't have to accept your testimony. Lav kol kaminach, the Ashra Slav Asra. You don't have the monus to say that this woman is usher to her second husband. We don't believe you that she was once Mikudeshes to his brother. We don't have to accept your testimony. You're not Nemo. Zok to Gemara Viter, turning it on to Amid Beis. Dr. Gemara, Lav Hainu, the Yehudis, the Vissel de Rabchia. This is similar to the story of Yehudis, the wife of Rabchia. What happened was she had terrible labor pains, and because of that, she wanted to get divorced because she said marriage is just not worth it. Labor is too painful. Yehudis, the Vissel de Rabchia, the Avish she suffered terribly in childbirth. And Rashi tells us because she had twins, and it was a very difficult child. So, in order to get away from her husband, she doesn't want to have another child. Amrli, she told her husband, Amrli Aim, my mother told me, my father was already Mekabel Kiddushin for me when I was younger, and therefore, when you married me, I was really an Ashish Ish, and we're not married. Amr Law, he told her, too bad. Lav kol community imach da asras lech iluye. Your mother can't come now and tell me something that's going to render you usher to me. You don't have an amanas. So similarly, Reb Chisda said to the mother, you can't come and tell me now that back then when the Kiddushin was made, this object was more valuable. Amr the Rabbanan told Reb Chisda, Amai, why do you say, Reb Chisda, that she's not mikudeshes? If it's not worth a shavar pruta, ha'ika sahadi be'idis biyadi devahuyoyma hava be'shavar pruta. We have Adam. So if we have Adam, then surely this woman is mikudeshes to the first man and not to the second, and she's also. And Tosfos tells us it doesn't mamish mean that there's Adam. Because if you know for sure that there's Adam, how could you allow her to go mutter? Now, near Lari, Lefarish, Vikasadi Kloimer Yotza there's a rumor that there's Adam somewhere that know that at the time of the Kiddushin this was worth a fruit. However, we don't know for sure. If we know for sure that there's Adam, we'd have to be choshes for it. But it's just a rumor. Zok to Gemara. Once again, Reb Chisda stood his ground and said, I don't have Adam here. Can't produce Adam here. For my sake, I'm posting that this woman was never Mukadeshes to the first husband and she could stay married to her second. You see from Reb Chanina that you could ignore Adam if you're not here. Her Adam are there and she should be usher. And Reb Chanina was discussing captives. If we know for sure that a woman was in captivity, she becomes also to a kohen because we're choshid once her captors had her, they violated her. What happened was they were the daughters of Shmuel who were captured, and they came to the Besmedish of Reb Chanina, but there were no Adam that said that they were captive. They on their own were saying we're captives, but we were not violated. So they have a pesha or pesha hitter. We only know that they were captives because they told us, and they're telling us they weren't violated. So therefore, we say that they're mutter to kahuna. The problem was they told him, but there are Adam. We know that there were Adam wherever they were captured. There were Adam there at the time. So there are Adam somewhere that saw these women being captured. So how could you, on their word, say that they're tahar? So Khadija responded, Adam, but you have Adam halfway around the world and she should be also here. It doesn't work that way. If Adam come here and tell us that these women were captured, then they're also. If we don't have the Adam here, we don't have to listen. So too, similarly, in our case, Reb Chisda rejected the fact that there were Adam somewhere else who could take testimony that, in fact, at the time of the Kiddushin, this was worth a pruta. So they didn't like Reb Chisda's raya from Reb Chanina. And just because they ignored, Reb Chanina ignored the Adam that might be around to tell us that she was captured, that's no reason to ignore Adam here that we know will tell us that this was worth the Shava Pruta. Because by the captives, we have a better reason to believe that they weren't violated. In Mekila b'Shvuya, maybe we were makel by a Shvuya to say that she wasn't violated. You know why? Because when she's in captivity, the Menavla Navsha, she'll do everything that she could do to make herself repulsive to her captors because she doesn't want them to violate her. Therefore, we're makel, but makel b'ishish. For that, we should be makel by this woman who are choshed their edim, who know that the object that she was mukadeshes with was a shava pruta, and we're going to risk letting her be married to somebody else. That we wouldn't. Anyway, there's this woman who Reb Chisda allowed her to get married, even though there were people who argued on the Chisda. There were two places that people argued on the Chisda. They argued on the Chisda because the mother said, we argued in the Chisda because of Shem Shava Pruta B'Modai, because of what Shmuel said, and there's people who argue in the Chisda because they were Edom. So Chisda allowed this woman to stay married, but there's people there who argued in the Chisda and held that the children of this woman were mamzer. So to Gemara, Ishtar Mehi Mishpacha B'Sura, they were actually grandchildren, descendants of this family in Surah, who parshu Rabbanim, and the Rabbanim would not marry into that family because they thought that they were mamzer. But there's three reasons why they could have been mamzer, because there are three reasons to argue on Reb Chisda, either because we hold like Shmuel of Shem Shabbat Prudim V'Hodai, or because there were Edom somewhere else, or because of the mother. But the more Valav Mishum to Strudel the Shmuel. The reason why the Rabbanan were choshed that this woman married illegally and her children are mamzerim is not because of Shem Shabbat Prudim V'Hodai, because they don't hold like Shmuel. It's because they hold the Gabai and Rava that we need to be choshed that there's Edom somewhere that say that this was in fact worth a pruta at the time of the marriage. There's this fellow who was mekadosh a woman using a stick of a hadas tree, a stalk of a hadas tree. And where did he do it? Not in a sneistic fashion, but in the middle of the street. So how do you deal with this? First of all, it's a worth of a pruta, and therefore is she first of all, nagdei karav. First, give this guy malchus like Rav. Rav doesn't allow you to get married in the shuk. And the itzrechita kishmu. And therefore, this woman requires a get because she's suffering mikudesh. The Rav Mangid, Rav would give malchus to anybody al the mekadosh b'shukah. If you're mekadosh someone in the shuk, it's not sneezing. It has to be done in a proper ceremony. Val the mekadosh b'biyah, someone who's mekadosh b'biyah pitzusa. Val the mekadosh b'lo shaduchi. If you just marry a woman without meeting her, without knowing her, just willy nilly. Vial the mevatel gita. If someone sends a get with shliach and with the shliach leloch, and then is mevatel the get, and they don't know about it, now you have a huge problem that the get might be given to the woman. She might think she's megoreshes, but she's really not. So someone who does that would get petched. Val the moser my donkey. What if someone is about to go into a session in Besdin, and they're going to force him to give a get, and he doesn't want to give a get, but he knows they're going to beat him up, and he's going to have to sign the get. So he could tell two agents before he goes to Besdin, I want you to know that they're going to force me to give a get. Right now in advance, I'm swearing that the get should be bought. Someone who does that gets patched as well. And if he's summoned to Besdin by a shliach Besdin, and he beats up the shliach Besdin, so he'll get malchus. Someone who's in chayim and he didn't resolve whatever he was put into chayim for, and he allowed himself to remain in chayim without resolving this avera for 30 days, that's also somebody who will get malchus. And a son-in-law who lives in the household of his mother-in-law, and Rashi says because mother-in-laws have a special love for their son-in-laws, and because of that, it's not healthy for them to live together. Are you telling me that only if he lives with her permanently, but if he stops in to visit, that wouldn't be a concern? There was a fellow who just hung out, he used to go visit his mother-in-law, and Reb Sheshes gave him malchus. So you see, even for a mere visit, you get malchus. So tomorrow, who made him have a daimah kamsim? That was a different situation. There were already rumors that there was an affair budding between this son-in-law and this mother-in-law. That's where they got malchus. But under normal conditions of a son-in-law can visit a mother-in-law, he's just not allowed to live with her. Tosfos speaks about nowadays people do live by their in-laws, and they don't do it because of any type of affair going on. They do it because it saves them money. So Tosfos says here, the third from the bottom Tosfos in the intermediate lines, Mashador Nachshav Beveis Moisam. Now that we do see it's commonplace for a couple to live by their in-laws, they're living rent free. The bias in the house. They're not there because of the mother-in-law, because he has the hots for his mother-in-law. They're there in the mother-in-law's house because of the apple strudel that she knows how to make, and because they can live there rent-free. Talk to Gemara weiter. Talk to Gemara weiter. Talk to Gemara. Nardar they said, Rav didn't give Malchus for any of these things. Ella al the Mekadosh Bia below to do. Only if someone's Mekadosh a woman with Bia without even having a relationship first, he just goes to be boil a woman with Kiddushin, that's what he gave Malchus. He gave Amri, even if there was a relationship there before, but he was Mekadosh Bia, Rav gave Malchus for that. It's not nice. Who gave the Kaddish with Tzif Sadas? Someone made Kiddushin with Tzif Sadasa, which Rashi touches, Machzela Shaladas. This is also a new bomb Shal Sugya. Oh, it's already 6:52. We'll have to stop here because this is a whole new bomb Shal Sugya. So we'll pick this up tomorrow. But tomorrow is Shabbos. I'm going to ask Avram. I didn't speak to him yet. I'm going to ask Avram if he would be so kind and say Shir on Shabbos. And the Mitzvah will also learn about Shabbos. Have a wonderful, wonderful day. Thank you very much.
Yosy. I think you can title the share apple strudel.
Say that again.
So you can title the share past the apple strudel.